Good morning. Happy Monday. Ms. Russo here.
Mr. Gilbert.
And Mr. Stoffer.
And today we are in week 2 of our new book, Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. The first thing we want to talk about and remind you of is our focus question. This is the question that we are thinking about and writing about and tracking for the entire book. So the question is, how does Alexie use author's craft to develop Junior's voice? Now let's talk a little bit more about author's craft and voice. So when we see the word voice in this question, we aren't talking about singing or talking or actually using your voice. We're actually talking about the way that an individual's writing style is used through a narrator to communicate their ideas in the reading. So that basically means how the author is using a certain style to tell us about the characters, the ideas, and the story itself. So let's look at some examples. When talking about how an author uses the author's craft to create their voice, they use it in 6 different ways. Now we've looked at DAFT, dialogue, feelings, actions, and thoughts, but let's take it a little bit further and talk deeper about these ways that an author uses author's craft. So the first thing we always look at is dialogue, and that's the talking out loud and what is said. And dialogue is going to be in our quotation marks, and so we're going to look at what the characters are saying to each other. Now, when we look at actions, we look at what the characters are doing, the things that they are physically doing, the choices that they make moving forward in the plot. Feelings are their emotions. It's how they feel about the situations that they encounter, and it's just the general things that they feel. Thoughts. Thoughts is a broader example of all the things that the narrator is telling us through their ideas. And it's usually when they're not doing something, they're not feeling something, and they're not saying something, and they're sharing their thoughts. Now, these 2 new ways of looking at author's craft are style, and that's when we look at the grammar punctuation piece of the writing, when we look at italics or bold, or when an author puts words separated line by line. That would be the style in which the words on the page look. The last one is word choice, and that's the vocabulary the author uses to convey the story or tell us what's happening. Word choice is really important in a story. We notice in reading Part-Time Indian that there are going to be some specific words that Junior uses to tell his story that we most likely don't see in another book like Roll of Thunder. So the word choice that Sherman Alexie uses to describe Junior's story is very different and specific.
All right, well, now that we've talked about these 6 categories, let's look at some specific examples, because every day when you read in our class right now, this new book, we're asking you to find an example in each chapter of how Sherman Alexie communicates Junior's voice. So you could look at any of these 6 areas to try and find one of those examples. So what we did is we looked at these first 4 chapters that we read last week, and we pulled out examples that we think provide strong examples of each of these 6. So starting with dialogue, here we have a quote from chapter 2 where Junior's mom says, "Junior, sweetheart," Mom said, "I'm sorry, but we don't have any money for Oscar." So when I, as the reader, read that quote, some words stand out to me. The word sweetheart, the word sorry, and it's almost like I can hear Junior's mom in my head, and I can hear the tone of her voice, right? She's communicating with him that she cares and that she feels empathy for him because she knows he's sad that his dog is sick and that she can't help the dog, right? The word sweetheart, the word sorry, those give us a little bit of her tone of voice. Now let's look at an example of an action. This comes from chapter 3 when Rowdy and Junior are at the powwow. And Junior tells us that Rowdy laughed, tripped over a tent pole, and stumbled into a minivan. So I see three really strong verbs, action words in this sentence, right? Laughed, I know what that means. Tripped and stumbled. Those words give me a really clear image in my head of what Rowdy's doing and why it might be making him laugh, right? He's acting kind of goofy. He's stumbling around, he's tripping over things. So that helps me to understand not only Junior as a narrator, but also Rowdy as a character and the ways that he behaves. Let's look at an example of feelings. This is also from chapter 2, when Junior realizes what his dad's going to do to help Oscar. And Junior says, I was hot mad, volcano mad, tsunami mad. So clearly the word mad is a word that explains feelings, but you see that Sherman Alexie here has also used really strong figurative language to communicate how mad is Junior, right? Because you can be mad about a lot of different things, but when you're talking about volcano mad or tsunami mad, we're thinking about an even more strong feeling of madness than just normally feeling mad. So we're really getting a sense of how mad Junior feels through the imagery that Sherman Alexie's given us. Then when it comes to thoughts, this comes also from chapter 3, when they're at the powwow, and Junior says, I think the chicken dancers are cool because, well, they dance like chickens, and you already know how much I love chicken. So we're learning a couple things about Junior here. One, we're learning about his sense of humor, because this is kind of a funny sentence. We're also learning that he loves chicken, which is an important thing to know about a person. Not everybody loves chicken. And we're also getting a sense of what does Junior look forward to when he goes to the powwow. So we're getting a lot of information in a few little words about our main character. Now we're coming to our two new pieces of author's craft that we haven't talked about before. So let's pay extra special attention to these couple examples. So style, like Ms. Chanchuso said, that's just how are the words written on the page? What has Sherman Alexie chosen to do to the words themselves to make them stand out to us? So here's an example that has some pretty strong stylistic choices. Junior says, Agnes Adams is my mother. My mother! And Adams is her maiden name. So we see there's really two ways here that Junior is emphasizing certain words in these sentences to us. First, we see the words my mother are in all caps. So if I was just looking at the page from far away, those words would pop out at me because they look bigger than the other words around them. And then we see that the word maiden is italicized, kind of slanted. So when I'm reading, that word is going to stand out in the sentence just because it looks a little bit different than the other words around it. So here in this example, you see, it's not about the words that have been chosen, it's just how are they written, and that's what makes certain words stand out to me as they're written. And last but not least, let's look at word choice. This comes from the very beginning of chapter 1, where Junior tells us, with my big feet and pencil body, I look like a capital L walking down the road. So here we see that Sherman Alexie's chosen the word pencil to describe Junior's body. So when I think about the shape of a pencil or a pen, it's long and thin, right? That gives me a sense of kind of what Junior's body looks like. And then he gives a really strong simile here. I look like a capital L. Well, his feet are so big and his body's super long and tall. So it's kind of a funny image, right, of an L walking down the street. So it gives me a really strong idea in my head of what Junior looks like. And it's also, once again, building that sense of humor and telling us that Junior is a person that's kind of sarcastic, kind of sassy, right? This isn't something that necessarily Cassie would have said in Roll of Thunder because she was a little bit more reserved. But Junior's clearly showing that he has a really great sense of humor here.
So a couple reminders after our first full week of starting this new book. Because we are learning remotely from home, some of us are reading this book in a couple different ways, even though we're all reading the same story. Some of you might have a copy of the physical book. Some of you might be using an e-reader or doing a read aloud. Some of you might be using the PDFs that have been posted on Google Classroom. Any way that you are reading the chapters day by day, everyone is responsible for going to that PDF and being able to click that link that's in red, that's in pink, that is highlighted in red for after reading. Because after you read the chapter, you're going to want to pull some quotes to use for your annotations. So just so we're all clear, your daily habits of work assignments should be to read a chapter every day. Each time you finish that chapter, that you have to click on that link and find a good example from the book that demonstrates voice for junior. So there are 5 points each. There's 30 chapters in the book. So that's a total of 150 points spread over a whole month while we take our time to read this book. It is going to be the same question every time, because if you look at that term at the top, it says habits of work. We're going to get in a really good habit for this book to specifically think about voice. So every example we find is always going to be the same for every chapter, but every chapter is going to give us some new information about our character. Once again, thank you to everyone who's already joined office hours this week, specifically on Wednesday when we first started the book. Every Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. for this book, we're going to do read alouds for whatever the assigned chapter is for that day. So if you want to think about it, if you were in room 315 with me, some of us would go to the back of the room in the gray tables and either read with me in a small group or read with Ms. Chancharusso in a small group. Or if you were in room 316 with Mr. Stauffer, you might have gone to the back circular table or maybe had like a small group in one of the corners of the room. So think about these office hours like another opportunity to read with your friends, read with your peers, and read with us. Sometimes not everyone likes to read independently by themselves every day, so we want to make sure that you're taking advantage of reading together, especially when we're all at home. One final thing, I've had a couple really motivated students contact me and say, Mr. Gilbert, I tried to click on the PDF for the day, but like when I clicked on it, I got this weird error message that says it wasn't able to load and I can't read it. If you're finding trouble with that, the best way to fix that is to simply restart your Chromebook and open up Chrome again. And normally that fixes that problem. There might be some instances where maybe that fix doesn't actually work. Mr. Gilbert actually knows a couple other ways to fix that. And if that happens, which probably shouldn't happen all too often, just go ahead and message any one of your teachers and we will make sure that you can have access to the reading. And finally, if you're reading this video on Monday, May 4th, you're watching this video and you're reading chapter 5, which is posted in Google Classroom. Tuesday, May 5th, you're reading chapters 6 and 7. We're giving you 2 chapters because 6 and 7 are both kind of short. So if you put it together, it's like 1 chapter. Wednesday, May 6th, you're reading chapter 8. Thursday, May 7th, you're reading chapter 9. And then Friday, May 8th, you're going to make sure you have caught up with all those chapters, did your annotations for each page, and then come to the Zoom class so that we can discuss what we read this week. As always, you got questions, we most likely definitely have answers for you. They're really good to bring up in office hours during read alouds, or if you have just a general question and you want to shoot us an email or message us on Google Hangouts. Thank you for those who are already doing that. Give me something to do. I love answering questions, and I'm sure Ms. Chancharusso and Mr. Stauffer also do.
Well, when I figure out how to use this cockamamie thing, well, have a good week, students.
Bye-bye.
See you on Friday.
Nice.